Hello, Marijn.
Hi, Alberto.
How's it going? Um,
Yeah,
so we are here to talk with Marijn about a few things that has to do with domain-driven design, event sourcing, and event-driven in general. We've been doing stuff together. I mean, I think we met when it was the first time. Von Vernon IDDD tour, was it the first time in and yeah, looks like that was the first time of many things happening 5 years ago. Then yeah, a lot of stuff kind of boomed great being there. And yeah, I would like to talk a little bit with you about which might be the main challenges when getting into event sourcing or event driven in general, and yeah, also to split between the two, because there's a lot of yeah, tricks and problem in that space.
definitely. So, do you want to? Did you want to ask one particular question to begin with, or shall I just move ahead and tell a bit about things I've experienced while building event source systems?
Yeah, let's get into what happens when you get into. I want to build it event sourcing. Well, I'll forget about the traditional modeling. Let's get specific into event sourcing, and then yeah, looks like everything is cool, beautiful. Well, we have the sticky notes somewhere, and it's just a matter of translating the sticky notes into code, and then well, it's not. And yeah, that's where I wanted to start talking.
Yeah. Well, I think that's immediately an interesting one. The first time I met Alberto was indeed at the IDDD Von Vernon workshop, and he mentioned that he had this interesting new approach of modeling sticky notes, and we used the domain that I was working on as an example back then, and yeah, all of a sudden this world opened up to me, and I realized, okay, this is how I actually should build the system, and not this approach that we'd been taking so far, which was just going one step at a time and making up our minds a lot. So together with the people that we envisioned that product with, we did an event storming workshop, and we had the feeling at that point in time that we knew exactly what we had to build. But like with any modeling activity, you need to close the feedback loop, right? So you need to take some of that collective modeling and go back to your computer's pair program. Well, that was difficult back then because I was alone.
Okay, well, and then multiple personalities for that.
Yeah, yeah, that's yeah. And then obviously take that as a sort of a feedback loop, what works well and what doesn't. And that's what we weren't doing necessarily. So at one point you realize, wait, we've been going in a particular direction for a very long time, but now we're kind of stuck here. We have something in production, but it's difficult to change it, or at least that was what we were experiencing, because we didn't have a lot of practical experience doing event sourcing and knowing what strategies you can apply to evolve your models. Because yeah, from a sort of principle point of view, an event source domain model can be evolved with quite some ease and quite some predictability if you adjust your process and the way you approach design. But it takes a different kind of mindset to get used to. So if you're coming from a structural world where making a change feels like, well, we'll change a database table, or we'll change a schema, and then we'll be done with it, then yeah, that's sort of opposed to the paradigm of separating reads from writes and evolving things over time and keeping things predictable and provable.
Yeah, and at the same time, it's also the thing about not being able to change the past, which has been proven to be kind of an annoying constraint for some people.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. One of the things, for example, when it comes to changing the past and when it comes to changing, is we always felt that whenever we would evolve our models, we also had to evolve the events that we had collected over the past. And over the years, I've learned that that is really a modeling challenge. You should wonder, why do we do that from a business perspective? And does it really make sense to evolve all of our events to the new model? Or do we only do that for a subset? And typically, the answer is you don't want to do that for everything because it's quite costly. Um, so on one hand, we need to take this sort of domain perspective where we're saying, what is it I really care about? And on the other hand, we need to take this, we can take on this sort of technical perspective. What I can't model for, I might need tooling for to help me solve it.
yep.
So that is really one of the things sort of applying ever since then. Don't solve with tools which you can't solve with modeling. And it took me a long time before I actually realized this, but ever since I have, it's been sort of eye-opening.
Yeah, I think I had a similar experience in some projects. Like the idea of changing the database structure, the fact that now you should have added a couple of extra field, or maybe this new requirement, just like it forced people to change the structure, but then yes, in event sourcing term, it's just like you change in the past. And in many cases, we found out the idea was, well, let's be honest, the domain is going to be more complex, but sounds like a registration submitted before the GDPR law and registration submitted after GDPR are not the same thing. Just like the amount of data you need to have in this place. So assuming you cannot assume that all the customers before a given date gave you that something. No, the real thing is just like they didn't know about the requirement, and you have to deal with the evolution, which means also your domain model becomes messier and messier. Because the business is messier and messier, and you're just trying to reflect that complexity, not to hide it. But it feels weird sometimes, and maybe
Exactly.
it's not the only way, and tricky.
Yeah. So, well, what I also always like is well, try to solve the problems you have today and not the problems that you think you'll have. So when it comes to this, when you're evolving your models and you're seeing things getting messier, I think that's actually a good thing to have, because then we can start to look at our problem space, meaning, okay, we have all of these evolving models, how do we deal with them? And initially you can get away with quite a naive approach for a while, just hard code versioning your message classes, maybe handwriting some custom command dispatching to new dispatchers to deal with exceptional situations or the evolution of your model. But at some point, you're doing this stuff so frequently that you're starting to look for ways to optimize your workflow and to make your team more effective. And that's really where I think tooling comes into play. And that's really when we need to take, again, sort of a more of a modeling point of view, where we're looking at things and wondering like, okay, so what is it within the event sourced CQRS modeling world that we can use to solve this problem? And one of the things I started to realize when I looked into that more and more is that metadata is really a key driver in tooling, it's really an attribute of modeling within a CQRS and event sourced world, where we have metadata on messages that can be leveraged to a very large extent to solve a lot of these tooling requirements that we might have. So just analyzing that space and learning from that opens up really quite a big world of opportunity to optimize processes and to become more effective in modeling your domain again.
Yeah, to totally make sense. It actually makes me wonder if I could involve you in one of the longest lasting discussion in the event sourcing community. Like, should you make your own library or should you use somebody else's framework? And I don't want to. I mean, if you want to escape this, because it's clearly a trap, you can escape this one. But yeah.
No, I don't want to escape this one. I think. Well, so obviously Greg has spoken about this himself quite a bit. Greg Young, for example, when he did the 10 years of event sourcing presentation a while ago on DDD Europe, where he said, well, you know, every framework sort of followed the same path. It was popular for a while, and then everyone started to see that in order to unify all of the wishes that we all have, it becomes rather difficult. I built an event sourcing and a CQRS framework for PHP in what was it, 2012 or so, because there wasn't anything in that language available. And I did a sort of pre-release to some people, and immediately we felt that as a company, this would never help us. You know, open sourcing that would only open us up to having more people having requests for what should be in that library that was not really linked to the problems that we were solving, because it is just it varies really from project to project, because certain projects are more heavy on the read side than they are on the write side, or they have different types of infrastructure in place, or there's so many forces on a library like that. And in essence, it is so incredibly simple to write one yourself. I wrote one for serverless architecture the other day in about 3 days. It's not completely feature complete, but it's something good enough that if I would have a real live project with a reasonable amount of effort, we could make that something that is production worthy, and that is highly tailored to your specific needs and evolvable. So yeah, I think it can be great to use something out there as a sort of reference architecture or something to take and to build on top. But I would always recommend people to in-source that within their project and to evolve that in the direction that they need to. Because yeah, being coupled to a piece of infrastructure like that is, yeah, if it's holding you back, is really a shame. Having said that, there is another way to look at it, and that is looking at what sort of standard components can we use within the landscape of an event-sourced CQRS world. So, you know, using an off-the-shelf commercial event store makes a lot of sense to me if you have a particular set of needs. So, and the same we could even say for tooling. It would be great if we would have more off-the-shelf tools available. And I think if we all would focus as a community a bit on how do we leverage metadata to, yeah, be able to route things, be able to contextualize our models in a sort of domain agnostic way, then we could, in fact, as a community, build a set of very valuable and maybe even commercially viable tools that aren't necessarily lock in that strongly as a framework. So I think there's really, we're at a point as a community where we can take sort of the next step and make something that is really useful. Yeah, smaller subsets that help you solve really a problem, rather than trying to tell you how to solve the problem of doing event sourcing and CQRS.
Yep. In now I'm actually looking also at the description of your training class, and you're actually getting specific on the tooling for do-it-yourself event sourcing tooling. What can you tell us something more about that specific training and the goals of what happened within that workshop frame.
Yeah. So maybe I should tell you a bit about the history first. So I was working on a project with a very qualified team, and we had quite a challenging assignment. We had to rebuild a system in a very short amount of time, with high stakes. And while we were doing that, we were constantly trying to optimize our workflow. So one of the days, I got very tired myself of constantly having to go into a database to see what had happened. And it was very naive. I just made a developer tool page where you could just see the last 100 events that were committed to the event store. And the only thing that I did was I created a bookmarklet that could take you from the page within the web application to that specific page, or a page where you could see all the events associated with that one process that you were just transacting with. And as soon as I added that, colleagues started to add to that. They started to contextualize things by, separating things with color so that you could see which events were part of which stream.
Okay.
I mentioned, wow, wouldn't it be cool if, if we prove that if a tester proves that something isn't working correctly, they just send us that link and we can just download a test case. So at the end of the day, one of my colleagues just hacked that together. It wasn't the most beautiful code, but it worked very well.
Yep.
You could just download a test case where it said, given all of the events that were part of that stream, and all you had to do is reorder a bit and change a few values. And then within 20 minutes or so, you'd have a regression test after someone proved that. And so we kept on just adding all of these tiny little things. And at some point, I started to realize, wait, there's this model emerging here of all these lower level tools, all these lower level functionalities. They make these higher order sources of value where we can combine tools in interesting ways that really help you optimize your workflow. And I was talking to some people in the DDD community, and they said, "Oh, you should do a workshop around that." So that's how we got there.
Yeah, but I actually I agree with the feeling. Sorry, I agree with the feeling of timing. I hate it. Eventual consistency of a conversation. That's something we should do something about. No, when doing event sourcing,
we had to make that joke in this conversation at some point.
Not happen again, probably. The feeling of I am pioneering. I'm not only coding. I'm actually pioneering the space. I'm seeing the places where I'm getting friction with these approaches. It can be kind of annoying. It can also be really rewarding, because I saw the look in your eyes when you said, like, oh, we done this, and then we had this, and then yes, proud kid, you did a good job, and that making it feel like, okay, tomorrow is going to be a faster day. It's going to be easier to solve this problem and all this stuff. So it's not only building the software, it's also building a little bit of the tooling around it that makes a difference, and in terms of being a proud developer.
And tooling always well, actually, since we're both DDDers, we should probably take a moment to I'm going to ask you the question first. So what is a tool to you? What does the word tool mean?
Whatever is giving me a tangible result, whatever is helping me make any progress towards the delivery or my satisfaction or the customer satisfaction, whatever is making the user happy. So and anything can be a tool. So And yes, you can see the little tool. Yes, right here. That's a little bit of a small scale
Yeah.
event storming there. And yes, that's a tool. But then also the mismatch between going from that into code. Well, that is. That's something which is different. All the little set of questions that for me happen every time I start a skeleton app from scratch in a new technology. How do I do this in here? How do I do that in here? Well, should I go in this direction, strongly typed, or well, here I don't have strongly typed. I'm in Ruby. What should I do here? And then all of this stuff. It's a continuous stream of questions, and then you never had all the checkbox complete, but at the same time you deliver value. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. So the tool you just pointed at, event storming, being it is really a great tool to get to make progress when building an event sourced domain model. But one of the tools that I used, for example, is closing that feedback loop. So we have a workshop. We might get very interesting results, but still, miscommunication sometimes happens. So
Yep.
I saw a presentation from Greg Young saying like, oh, you could visualize some of your given scenarios. And I thought, oh, wait, that's interesting. What if I turn that back into, the Post-its, and it just creates artifacts that look like our event storming workshop, so that our domain expert can weigh in on if we've really implemented things correctly. And as soon as I did that on the first project I did it, that was just a one-off piece of code, so it didn't keep on running. It was just a tryout. But the domain expert, she immediately caught like a few areas where we did in fact misinterpret some of the business rules. And so you just have to, it's not about, oh, I have to create a tool that visualizes my test scenarios back into an event storming artifact. No, it's about what is the most important source of value in this project, where I could, help get us to a result faster, or make the result more reliable, or make us possible to evolve what we have in a fast pace. So it's just the combination of looking at what are we trying to achieve here, and on the other hand, looking whether we can solve that with modeling or with ways to improve our process.
Yep, and put in this way, looks like we are rediscovering the good old Whirlpool model from Eric Evans. Just like conversation is a tool, modeling at the whiteboard is a tool, event storming is a tool, a BDD test scenario is a tool, an example is a tool, the story of what we've done step by step with names and surnames of users is a tool. And the moment you say it loud, somebody's going to say like, no, it's not the way it happened, not exactly like that. And getting corrected is really powerful. In this case, you actually highlighted like, we just needed something to get better feedback from the domain expert, because a model which is too polite looked like yes, polished, perfect, nice, and then seemed okay till when we declinated in some other form, and no, it's not okay. Misinterpretation will always happen. And the ultimate feedback, it actually comes probably from the code level, when you discover that there's a few things missing, but then there's so many stakeholders. I mean, we are just one of them. Developers are one stakeholder, because it needs to pass through the doors of hell of the compiler and our test suite and the deployment. But then it's maybe we interpret everything correctly, and then it's the users or the customers misunderstanding our purpose. Everything is solid, but it's just plain stupid in the user eyes, and it is working, but it is not beautiful to work with, and then you lose customer even with working code. And then it's never a single stakeholder involved, and just so you need multiple tools. Sorry, that was supposed to be a question that you got me talking. I'm not very good as an interviewer. No, no.
No, well, it's okay. It's okay.
No, just faking my guilty feeling. I know I can do it with you. I would like to get a little bit more specific because it's also I was reading a blog post about projections and all this stuff. And projection for me have been yeah. At the beginning, I was reading this stuff and talking with Greg Yang too, and yeah, projections are the easy stuff. And that was yeah 5 years ago, I think. And then okay, that's gonna be easy stuff. Let's do it. Then you get in some more tricky areas, and no, it wasn't that easy. I mean, some projection, if you are close to the crowd space, they are trivial, and they are nothing more than yes, just the visualization part you took away from the old aggregate and put into another box. Okay. But then you have some read model which are really, really complex. They get information from multiple sources. They get something which is maybe you just need to visualize data in a form which is helping some reasoning, some thoughts, some key decision, and that projection turned out to be non-trivial at all. And so yes, that's my space for the question. What has been your experience in that space?
Well, so there's a set of experiences. So the difficult, well, the first sort of tough thing that I experienced when getting started with event sourcing in relationship to projections and also evolving them was that with my sort of puristic and naive domain-driven design perception, I thought I needed to introduce repository pattern. I did so as well within the projections, within the projectors that I was built. So a projection is really doing partial updates whenever we receive events, and then at some point we're ready, and this model can be consumed. But if we're going to use a repository implementation to make that happen, then we're really creating a little hidden bottleneck within that projection, because a repository by default, a repository implementation means that we're going to get an entirely consistent object, which it isn't, because we're partially updating it. So then we started to model for it. But basically what you're doing is every time you're receiving an event, you're getting an entire object graph, making some changes, and then putting it back in. And it really doesn't make any sense to use a repository pattern like that within a projection. It might make sense to use a repository interface on top of your projection to hide that implementation detail, and we can go that far. But other than that, there's really not a lot of space for that pattern when building a projection. So with the company that I had, we started to see that problem as it really became a bottleneck at some point, because some of those projections were incredibly fast, and especially if we would have infrastructure problems with our cheap cloud provider, things would go bad and things would restart, and it would take a long time to rebuild. And that's when I first started to see the real need for having a projection in place and having to replace it. But the way we went at it was really naive. We would just build a better one and test it locally and put it in production and cross our fingers. Well, I guess we got really lucky most of the time. But nowadays, I would really say build a second projection, which is obviously what people have been saying, but this was just my personal journey. Build a second projection that is compatible with the original one. Put it into production so that it can actually catch up with the event stream. Enable it for some subset of your users, or maybe first on a dedicated deployment environment. And then from there on, start to enable this for more and gradually enable this for more and more traffic. And if you have proper feature toggling infrastructure in place, which is really not that difficult to put into place, yeah, you can really start to take testing in testing in production to a really nice level where you really feel comfortable about what you're doing. Because even if you're testing a lot of, even if you're doing a great job at doing unit testing, end-to-end testing, exploratory testing in whatever test environment you have, you know, the realities of your production data set might still be a little harsher than you anticipate them to be. So putting things into production without them causing any effect for customers is really one of the best ways to get assurances. And then combining that with feature flagging to slowly enable things to really make sure that on a customer experience level, everything is working smoothly, can really make you can really make a team go from a level of uncertainty to a level of, okay, we can be so experimental. Even on Fridays at 4:30, we can have a crazy idea and we can just put it in production, and we'll feel really certain about what we're doing because we always have a safety net. And I think, sure, people have been talking about this for as long as these techniques have been around, but I think we need to talk about them more in the context of how we organize the process around it. And so I really hope that with the workshop, but also besides the workshop and in the community, we start to talk a bit more about that. The relationship with not just how we're programming things, but how we're embedding them within our day-to-day process, and how that at the end of the day is sort of affecting the mood of the team. One of the interesting things with the workshop is some of the participants will define a tool not just as that thing that makes them, you know, faster and do their job well, but as something that is, you know, making them happy, bringing some happiness within that process. You know, it is great if you're cooking and you're using a marvelous sharp knife, and it's very enjoying to cut a tomato, especially if you want to cut it in a particular way, and it works out very well because you have this great tool. And I think that's the same with our work on a day-to-day basis.
Yep. I'm totally with that. I'm starting to appreciate more and more what comes in. I call them micro rewards. Just like the feeling of using the right tool, the sharp knife, or yes, this operation was taking me 5 seconds. Now it's taking me only 2. And it's just 3 seconds, so you should not be happy, but we are. And especially if you tried the 2 seconds, then you can't go back to the 5 seconds anymore because it really feels so annoying. And it's still 3 seconds. So rationally should be not a problem, but emotionally it is a problem. And we deliver better stuff if we are happier. Only we are at the same time, we are on the thin line between rationality and an addiction. So we should be aware of where we are exactly. But yes, this is part of it. You cannot take away the joy from the software development. We need a little bit of this satisfaction. Otherwise, oh come on, I'm working with it. Slow stack, everything is a pain, everything is boring. It's not a pain, it's only way more annoying than with another platform, and then becomes annoying and painful. So we need those little joys. And yep, totally on this.
Definitely. So the thing is also, so that's obviously one side, right? We need those micro rewards, and people need to feel sort of those joys, and so that they can focus more of their attention on the things that matter. But there is indeed also that other side, and that is to take the parallel with sharp. We also need to know if this tool is really for our level of experience. So no one really wants to pick up a chainsaw if you've never operated one. Like the tool itself, it looks very scary. You know, you can make some big accidents with a tool like that if you don't know how to operate it. So as designers of tools, we also need to take that into account, right? That it needs to, the tool itself, it needs to be sort of, necessarily intention revealing, but it needs to reveal, the level of success that you can have with it, but also the level of damage you can do with it if you don't know what you're doing. Because tools in themselves, they do have a bunch of assumptions in them about how you're modeling and how you're designing, and that can be easily taken into the wrong direction. So I've experimented with declarative design for aggregate modeling, and I once took that maybe a step too far. And yeah, that was an example of where I maybe should have designed the whole thing to look a bit more like a chainsaw.
Yep.
Because before you know it, we're modeling in YAML files without really understanding what modeling means. Or yeah, so there is this thin line, and like with any design, sometimes you need to do something too little or much to know what is appropriate. So that's also really the line that we're trying to walk with the workshop. Like, how far can we take it, or how little can we do, and what is enough? And it's really great to do that with a group of people, because everyone brings so many experiences and yeah, from their work, and you can share stories of what worked and what didn't. So the workshop is also really not me telling you how to do all of this stuff. It's really as
Yeah.
a collective finding things that work in a particular context.
Yeah, I would say probably also a shared feeling of pain, because if you're doing something in an unusual scenario, yeah, that's the way we are supposed to do things, and then you don't realize that this is okay, let's say, for 2 fields in the event, but it's not okay if you have 45 fields in the event, and all the extra stuff is not exactly the same thing of a small one. But you don't know exactly when these start to be pain, or when these start like, oh, this is really screaming for an alternative solution. You just didn't have enough complexity at the beginning, but you need to know, okay, this is the moment where people around me are getting worried. Okay, so it's not me, it's everybody. So I guess the feeling is right. And yep, cool.
Definitely. And the principles also help there. And so the principle of, for example, don't solve with too much modeling. That if you're experimenting with these things, and you see, oh yeah, I can actually solve this problem with better modeling, so I should probably not solve it with tooling in the long run. Maybe you can do that short, to buy me some time, to buy my team some time, to be able to solve it properly. And also using the paradigm. So we have events, so we can respond to them. We can project them in any way we want. So we shouldn't sort of read the old state-based model on top of an event store. If we want to query in a particular way for events, that should probably be a projection. So really not trying to change, the basic aspects of an event source domain model, but really trying to create higher level abstractions on top of that help us solve our day-to-day issues and challenges.
Yep. No, that's definitely an interesting space for me. Just like I thought it was, relatively okay, easy, just change the paradigm, and then after starting drilling, oh well, no, that's tricky, that's interesting, that's something where I can get huge boost. That's something that seems like easy, and then actually there is a projection that I have to throw away and restart because it seemed like a fantastic idea, and no, it's not. And so need to start over. And but yeah, that's the idea of immutability and all this stuff. That was actually completely failed branch, because it was like, oh yes, I can do that, and for some reason I'm not. And cool. Checking the time, and we are exactly at our bell. So the thing is, well, thank you for this conversation. That was really cool, and there's a lot of stuff that that we should be digging, exploring, I guess, experimenting is probably the best thing to do in this space. Let's make sure we're gonna see each other soon. And are you gonna be in Denver, or is it gonna be somewhere actually in Europe? Okay, cool.
I'm going to be in Denver. That's actually where I'm doing this workshop as well, at Explore DDD, and then obviously later on this year in Milan. What was it, 12th December, I think. So yeah, let's do that.
Well, let me let me look at the date. Yeah, this December 12th. Yes. So yeah, see you there. See you in Denver first. See you somewhere else around Europe before that, and then see you in Milan.
Yes.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Have a great.
It's great to talk to you. Thanks. And see you soon.
My pleasure. I'll see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.